The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the weathered wooden church in Nogales, Arizona territory, and Rebecca Eleanor pressed her thick spectacles against the bridge of her nose as she peered through the dusty window at the man who was supposed to become her husband in less than an hour. Even through the warped glass and layers of desert grime, she could see him clearly enough, tall and broad-shouldered, with golden hair that caught the harsh September sunlight of 1878 like spun wheat. He stood beside an elegant woman whose dark curls tumbled over her shoulders in perfect ringlets, and Rebecca's heart sank like a stone thrown into a well when she saw how the woman touched his arm with easy familiarity. The driver opened the door and Rebecca stepped down carefully, her worn boots finding purchase on the wooden step. She straightened her plain blue traveling dress, acutely aware of the dust coating every inch of the fabric after 3 days of rough roads from Missouri. Her thick spectacles, the only pair she owned, sat heavy on her face, the wire frames digging into the tender skin behind her ears. Without them, the world dissolved into meaningless shapes and shadows, but with them, she saw everything with painful clarity, including the way the golden-haired man's face fell when he looked at her. Miss Eleanor. His voice carried across the space between them, polite but distinctly cooler than the letters he had written over the past 6 months. Those letters had been full of warmth and hope, describing his ranch and his dreams of building something lasting in this harsh territory. She had poured her heart into her responses, though she had been careful to mention her poor eyesight, explaining that she wore thick spectacles and could barely see without them. He had written back that such things mattered little to a man of character, that he valued a woman's mind and heart above all else. Apparently, he had changed his mind upon seeing her in person. "Yes, I am Rebecca Eleanor." She walked toward him, lifting her chin despite the way her stomach churned with dread. "You must be Mr. Callahan. Call me Thomas." He glanced at the dark-haired woman beside him, and something passed between them that made Rebecca feel like an intruder in her own future. "This is Miss Victoria Hartford. She arrived in town 2 weeks ago from San Francisco." Victoria's smile was sympathetic, but tinged with triumph. She was beautiful in a way that Rebecca knew she could never be, with smooth skin and large eyes that needed no correction, full lips painted a delicate rose color, and a figure that the latest fashions displayed to perfection. Rebecca's own figure was decent enough, but her dress was 3 years old and mended in places, and she knew the long journey had left her looking bedraggled and plain. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Miss Eleanor." Victoria's voice was like honey, sweet and smooth. "Thomas has told me all about your arrangement." The word arrangement stung worse than any outright insult. Rebecca clutched her small traveling bag tighter and met Thomas's eyes squarely. "I have the letters you sent. The last one confirmed that the wedding would take place today at 2 o'clock. Thomas had the decency to look uncomfortable. He ran a hand through his golden hair and shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "Miss Eleanor, perhaps we should speak privately. I think I know what you wish to say." Rebecca's voice came out steadier than she felt. "You have reconsidered our agreement. You must understand, things have changed. When Victoria arrived, I realized that perhaps we were both making a mistake, entering into a marriage based solely on correspondence. You are a fine woman, I am certain, but I believe we would not suit." The words hung in the hot desert air between them. Rebecca felt her face flush with humiliation, but she refused to look away. She had traveled over 1,000 miles, spent nearly all her savings on the journey, left behind the only home she had ever known, all for a man who now looked at her as though she were a stray dog he regretted inviting onto his porch. "I see." She took a breath, forcing herself to think practically despite the crushing disappointment. "I do not have the funds to return to Missouri immediately. I will need to find work." Thomas looked relieved that she was not going to cry or make a scene. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. "Please take this. It is the least I can do for the inconvenience." Pride warred with practicality in Rebecca's chest, but practicality won. She accepted the pouch, feeling the weight of coins inside. "Thank you. Can you direct me to any establishment that might be hiring? I can read, write, and cipher. I have experience keeping household accounts and managing stores of supplies. The Silver Star Saloon is looking for someone to manage their books." Thomas seemed eager to be helpful now that he knew she would not be his problem for long. "The owner is a woman named Martha Green. She is fair-minded and honest, or as honest as anyone in the saloon business can be." Victoria touched Thomas's arm again, a possessive gesture that declared her victory more clearly than words. "We should go, Thomas. We have that appointment with the minister to cancel the wedding arrangements." They walked away together, leaving Rebecca standing alone in front of the church where she should have been married. She watched them go, blinking back tears that she refused to shed in public. A hot wind swept down the dusty street, carrying the scent of horses and desert sage. Around her, Nogales bustled with afternoon activity. Wagons rattled past, their wheels kicking up dust. Men in dusty work clothes and wide-brimmed hats moved between the various shops and businesses that lined the main street. Somewhere nearby, a blacksmith's hammer rang against an anvil with steady, rhythmic strikes. Rebecca adjusted her spectacles and squared her shoulders. She had survived worse than a broken engagement. When her parents died of fever 5 years ago, she had managed the small general store they left her until debts and bad luck forced her to sell it. She had worked as a clerk, a seamstress, and a teacher's assistant, always scraping by, always alone. She had answered Thomas Callahan's advertisement for a bride because she was tired of being alone, tired of struggling, tired of seeing pity in people's eyes when they looked at the spinster with the thick glasses and no prospects. Well, she was alone again, but she was in a new place where no one knew her history. She could make something of this disaster if she kept her head and worked hard. The Silver Star Saloon was easy to find. A 2-story building with a painted sign showing a silver star against a black background. Rebecca hesitated before pushing through the swinging doors, knowing that respectable women did not frequent such establishments, but needing work more than she needed to maintain appearances that had gained her nothing back in Missouri. The interior was dimmer than the bright street outside, and Rebecca paused to let her eyes adjust. The saloon was relatively quiet at this hour, with only a handful of men nursing drinks at the bar and playing cards at corner tables. A woman in her 40s with graying brown hair and a no-nonsense expression stood behind the bar, wiping down glasses with a white cloth. "If you are looking for work that does not involve entertaining the customers, you are in luck," the woman said before Rebecca could speak. "I need someone with a good head for numbers, not another girl in a short skirt." Rebecca walked to the bar, grateful that the woman had saved her the awkwardness of explaining herself. "My name is Rebecca Eleanor. I was told you might need someone to manage your books. I have experience with accounts and inventory management." Martha Green set down the glass she had been cleaning and studied Rebecca with sharp hazel eyes that missed nothing. "You are the mail-order bride that Thomas Callahan just rejected, are you not?" Heat flooded Rebecca's cheeks, but she did not look away. News travels quickly in this town. Small place, big gossip. Thomas is a fool, but that works in my favor if you truly need work. Martha gestured toward a door at the back of the room. "I have been managing the books myself, but I would rather spend my time on other aspects of the business. The pay is $30 a month plus room and board. The room is small, but it is clean and has a good lock on the door. You would work afternoons and evenings, mostly in the back office, though I would expect you to help serve drinks during our busiest hours. No entertaining men, no going upstairs with customers. Those are my rules and I enforce them strictly. Do you drink? No, madam. Good. I do not tolerate drunkenness among my employees. Do you have any moral objections to working in a saloon? Rebecca considered the question honestly. I confess I would not have chosen it under different circumstances, but I find my circumstances are quite limited at present. As long as I am not asked to compromise my own principles, I have no right to judge how others spend their time and money. A smile tugged at Martha's lips. You will do. When can you start? Immediately, if you wish. Then let me show you to your room and you can begin tomorrow. You look like you need a good meal and a decent night's rest. The room was indeed small, barely large enough for a narrow bed, a washstand, and a chest of drawers, but it was clean and the sheets smelled of soap and sunshine. Rebecca set down her bag and sank onto the bed, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of the day's disappointments. She had been so hopeful during the long journey west, imagining a new life with a husband who valued her mind and character, a home of her own, perhaps children someday. Instead, she had been rejected within minutes of her arrival, dismissed for being plain and wearing thick glasses. She removed those glasses now and rubbed the sore spots on her nose where they rested. The room blurred into soft shapes and muted colors. She lay back on the bed and closed her eyes, too tired even to cry. Sleep claimed her quickly, a deep, dreamless sleep born of exhaustion and disappointment. When she woke, golden evening light slanted through the small window, and she could hear the saloon below coming to life with music and voices and laughter. She washed her face in the basin, put her glasses back on, and went downstairs to meet her new life head-on. Martha was serving drinks to a group of dusty cowboys who looked like they had just finished a long cattle drive. She caught Rebecca's eye and nodded toward the back office. The books are on the desk. Take a look and let me know what you think. The office was cramped and cluttered with papers, but the desk was solid, and the lamp burned with clean oil. Rebecca settled into the chair and opened the ledger, losing herself in columns of numbers and careful calculations. She had always found comfort in the orderly world of accounts, where everything had its place, and every problem had a solution if you looked at it from the right angle. She worked until late, organizing receipts and reconciling discrepancies, only vaguely aware of the noise from the main room. When she finally emerged, her eyes burning with strain, Martha was counting the nights take at the bar. You should have stopped hours ago, Martha said, but she looked pleased. Did you find the mess I warned you about? Your previous bookkeeper was creative with his arithmetic, Rebecca said diplomatically. But I believe I can sort it out. You have been losing about $15 a month to mathematical errors and possibly deliberate theft. Martha's expression hardened. I thought as much. That is why the previous bookkeeper is previous. Can you fix it? Yes, madam. It will take me a few days to reconstruct the accurate accounts, but then I can maintain them properly going forward. Good. Now get some sleep. You look ready to collapse. The next few days fell into a steady rhythm. Rebecca worked in the office during the afternoon and evening, emerging only to help serve drinks during the busiest hours around sunset. The work was demanding but satisfying, and Martha proved to be a fair employer who appreciated competence and honesty. The other women who worked at the Silver Star, 3 young ladies who did indeed wear short skirts and entertain customers with conversation and dancing, treated Rebecca with cautious friendliness. They seemed relieved that she did not judge them for their work, and she found herself enjoying their company during shared meals in the kitchen. It was on her 5th day in Nogales that she first saw Yates Crawford. She was serving drinks during the evening rush, carefully carrying a tray of whiskey glasses to a table of card players, when the saloon doors swung open and a man walked in who commanded attention without saying a word. He was tall, with dark hair that brushed his collar and gray eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His face was weathered by sun and wind, with strong features and a serious expression that suggested he smiled rarely, but meant it when he did. He wore dusty work clothes and well-worn boots, and he moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. Rebecca looked away quickly, focusing on delivering the drinks without spilling them, but she was aware of him settling at the bar and speaking to Martha in a low voice. When she returned to the bar for another order, Martha caught her arm gently. "Rebecca, this is Yates Crawford. He has a cattle ranch about 10 miles north of town. Yates, this is Rebecca Eleanor, my new bookkeeper." Rebecca met his eyes briefly, expecting to see the same dismissive glance that most men gave her, the quick assessment and quicker loss of interest. Instead, Yates Crawford studied her face with genuine attention, his gray eyes curious and kind behind the weariness that lined his features. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Eleanor." His voice was deep and rough, like rocks tumbling in a stream. "Martha speaks highly of your skills with numbers. Thank you, Mr. Crawford." She was acutely aware of how plain she must look, with her hair pinned back simply and her thick spectacles reflecting the lamplight. "I do my best." "Yates lost his bookkeeper last month," Martha said. "The man took a job at one of the big ranches further south where they paid better. Yates has been struggling to manage his accounts on his own." "I am fine," Yates said, but the tightness around his eyes suggested otherwise. "I just need to find time to sit down and sort through it all." Martha gave Rebecca a meaningful look. "You have been working too hard, Rebecca. You could use some extra income, and Yates could use someone who knows what they are doing. Perhaps you two could come to an arrangement. You could ride out to his ranch on your days off and help him get his books in order." Rebecca hesitated. The thought of spending time alone with a strange man at an isolated ranch made her nervous, but she also recognized an opportunity when she saw one. Extra income would help her save for the future, whatever that future might hold. And there was something about Yates Crawford that seemed trustworthy, a steadiness in his manner that put her at ease despite her caution. "I would be willing to discuss such an arrangement," she said carefully, "if Mr. Crawford is interested." Yates looked at her for a long moment, and Rebecca had the unsettling feeling that he saw more than most people did when they looked at her. "My ranch is called the Broken Creek. It is not a large operation, just me and 2 hired men, but we are building something good. I cannot pay as much as the big ranches, but I can offer fair wages and honest work. Would $15 a month be acceptable for 1 day a week?" It was more than fair, actually generous for part-time work. Rebecca nodded. "That would be acceptable, Mr. Crawford." "Yates." "Please call me Yates. Then you must call me Rebecca." A smile touched his lips, transforming his serious face into something warmer and more approachable. "Rebecca it is. Can you ride?" "Not well, I am afraid. I learned the basics as a child, but I have had little practice in recent years." "I will bring a gentle horse for you. Would this Sunday suit you? I could pick you up after church services if you attend, or mid-morning if you do not." "Mid-morning would be fine. I have not yet found a church here in town." They settled the details of the arrangement, and Yates finished his drink and left, pausing at the door to nod farewell to her. Rebecca watched him go, feeling an odd flutter in her chest that she firmly told herself was simple nervousness about the new job, nothing more. Martha was watching her with an expression of amused satisfaction. Yates is a good man, one of the best around here. He has had a hard time of it these past few years, but he never complains and he always pays his debts. What kind of hard time? Rebecca asked before she could stop herself. His father died 3 years ago and left him the ranch with more debts than assets. Yates has been working himself near to death trying to build it back up. He is succeeding slowly, but it costs him. He used to smile more, used to come to town for dances and social gatherings. Now he just works. Rebecca understood that kind of struggle all too well. She returned to her duties, but her mind kept drifting back to Yates Crawford and his gray eyes that had looked at her like she was worth seeing. Sunday morning dawned clear and hot, the sun already fierce by the time Yates arrived at the Silver Star on a sturdy bay horse, leading a second mount, a gentle-looking gray mare. Rebecca had dressed in her most practical clothes, a simple brown skirt and white blouse, with her hair braided and pinned securely. She had debated leaving her glasses behind, knowing they made her look severe and bookish, but vanity was no match for practicality. She needed to see to do her work properly. Yates helped her mount, his hands steady and careful, and they set off at an easy pace through the dusty streets of Nogales and out into the desert landscape beyond. The morning air was still relatively cool, and Rebecca found herself relaxing as they rode. Yates was not much of a talker, but his silence was comfortable rather than awkward, and he pointed out various landmarks along the way, explaining the boundaries of his property and the location of reliable water sources. The Broken Creek Ranch sat in a valley between low hills, with a small creek running along the eastern edge of the property. The ranch house was modest, a simple wooden structure with a wide porch and a few scraggly trees providing shade. The barn and outbuildings were well maintained, everything neat and orderly despite the obvious lack of spare resources for decoration or luxury. "It is not much to look at yet," Yates said as he helped her dismount, "but it is mine, and it is honest." "It looks like a good, solid place," Rebecca said, meaning it. She could see the care that had gone into maintaining the property, the attention to detail that spoke of pride and determination. Inside, the house was clean but Spartan, with minimal furniture and no feminine touches. Yates led her to a small office off the main room, where papers and ledgers covered a scarred wooden desk in chaotic disarray. "I keep meaning to sort through it all, but by the time I finish the day's work, I am too tired to think straight," he admitted, running a hand through his dark hair in a gesture of frustration. "And I am not good with numbers to begin with. Never have been." Rebecca surveyed the mess with a practiced eye. "This will take several sessions to untangle completely, but I can make a start today. Do you have all your receipts and records of sales? Most of them, I think. Some might be in the barn office." They spent the next hour gathering all the relevant papers, and then Yates left her to work while he went to tend to his cattle. Rebecca lost herself in the familiar task of creating order from chaos, organizing receipts by date, recording transactions in neat columns, calculating balances and discrepancies. The work was challenging because of the volume of accumulated paperwork, but it was straightforward enough. She was deep in concentration when Yates returned several hours later, carrying a tray with bread, cheese, and water. "You need to eat," he said simply, setting the tray on a clear corner of the desk. Rebecca realized she was famished. She removed her glasses to rub her tired eyes, and the world immediately blurred. She heard Yates move closer, felt rather than saw him looking at her. "You really cannot see without those, can you?" His voice was gentle, curious rather than mocking. Not well. Everything beyond a few inches from my face becomes indistinct. She fumbled for her glasses and put them back on, bringing his face back into sharp focus. He was standing close, closer than was strictly proper, looking at her with an expression she could not quite interpret. "I like them," he said quietly. "Your glasses. They make your eyes look larger, more expressive, and they suit you." Rebecca felt heat rise in her cheeks. No one had ever said anything kind about her glasses before. They had always been something to be endured, a mark of imperfection that made her less desirable in the eyes of potential suitors. "That is kind of you to say," she managed. "I am not being kind. I am being honest." Yates stepped back, giving her space, but his words lingered in the air between them. "How is the work going?" They discussed the accounts over the simple meal, and Rebecca was impressed by how quickly Yates grasped the situation once she explained it clearly. He was not stupid with numbers, as he had claimed, just overwhelmed and exhausted. With proper organization and regular maintenance, his accounts would be manageable. "You are losing money on your feed purchases," she told him. "The supplier in Nogales charges more than the one in Tucson, enough that it would be worth making the longer trip once a month to stock up." Yates leaned over her shoulder to look at the calculations she had written out, and Rebecca was suddenly very aware of his proximity, the warmth of his body, the scent of leather and sage that clung to him. "I never thought to compare prices," he admitted. "I just bought from the closest supplier to save time. Time is valuable, but so is money. If you are trying to pay down debts, every dollar matters." "You are right." He straightened up and looked at her with something like admiration. "I knew Martha would not steer me wrong." "You are very good at this." The praise warmed her more than it should have. Rebecca returned to work, and the afternoon passed quickly. By the time the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, she had made significant progress, establishing a baseline for the accounts and creating a system for ongoing maintenance. "I can come back next Sunday and continue," she said, as Yates saddled the horses for the return journey. "In 3 or 4 more sessions, everything should be completely organized and current. I appreciate it more than I can say." Yates looked at her directly, his gray eyes serious. "I know you did not come to Arizona to work yourself to exhaustion for strangers. Thomas Callahan is a fool for not seeing your worth." The mention of Thomas stung less than it had a week ago, but it still touched a tender spot. "He chose a woman who suited him better. That is his right." "He chose a woman who looks like a porcelain doll and has about as much depth," Yates said bluntly. "Victoria Hartford is beautiful. I will grant you that, but she is spoiled and selfish. She will make his life miserable within a year. You, on the other hand, are the kind of woman a man could build a life with." Rebecca did not know what to say to that. They rode back to town in silence, but it was a charged silence, full of unspoken thoughts and possibilities. When they reached the Silver Star, Yates helped her down from the horse, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than strictly necessary. "Until next Sunday, then," he said softly. "Yes, next Sunday." She watched him ride away, then went inside to find Martha waiting with a knowing smile. "How was your first day at the Broken Creek?" "Productive. The accounts were in worse shape than I expected, but nothing that cannot be fixed with time and attention." "And how was Yates?" "He was a perfect gentleman." Rebecca tried to keep her voice neutral, but Martha's smile widened. "He is a good man, Rebecca. One of the few truly good men I have met in this territory, and he looks at you like you are water in the desert." "He does not," Rebecca protested, but her heart raced at the thought. "He does. I saw it when he came in asking about you midweek, wanting to know if you were settling in well, if you needed anything." He has never shown that kind of interest in a woman before, not even before his father died and he became so serious. Rebecca wanted to dismiss Martha's words as wishful thinking, but over the following weeks, she found it increasingly difficult to deny that something was developing between her and Yates. He came to town more frequently, always with some plausible excuse, but clearly making an effort to see her. On Sundays, she rode out to the Broken Creek and worked on his accounts, but they also talked, long conversations that ranged from serious discussions about ranch management to lighter topics like favorite books and childhood memories. She learned that he was 26 years old, 2 years her senior, and that he had grown up on the ranch, learning everything from his father. He had briefly considered studying law back east but had returned home when his mother died, unable to leave his father to manage alone. When his father passed away 3 years later, Yates inherited not just the ranch, but a mountain of debt incurred by medical bills and bad investments. "I could have sold it," he told her one Sunday as they sat on the porch after a long afternoon of work, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "There were buyers interested in the land, but this place is all I have left of them, of the life we built together. I could not let it go without a fight." "I understand," Rebecca said quietly. "When I had to sell my parents' store, it felt like losing them all over again, but sometimes letting go is the only way to survive." "Is that what you did? Let go and survived?" "I tried. But I never really found my footing again after that. I drifted from job to job, place to place, never quite belonging anywhere. When I saw Thomas's advertisement for a bride, I thought perhaps it was a chance to finally have a home again." Yates turned to look at her, his gray eyes intent. "And now I do not know. I have work and a place to live, which is more than many can say. But it is not a home, not really. It is just a temporary landing place." "What would make it a home for you?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Rebecca met his gaze and saw something there that made her breath catch in her throat, a heat and hunger that no one had ever directed at her before. "I think a home is built with people, not just places," she said carefully. "It is about belonging with someone, being valued and needed and chosen." "Chosen," Yates repeated softly. "Yes, that matters, does not it? Being chosen, not just settled for." They were sitting closer than they had realized, near enough that Rebecca could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the shadow of stubble on his jaw, the way his gaze dropped to her lips and then back to her eyes as if asking permission. "Yates," she whispered, not sure if she was warning him away or encouraging him forward. He closed the distance between them slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull back, but she did not move. When his lips touched hers, gentle and questioning, she felt something inside her unfold like a flower opening to the sun. She had been kissed before, clumsy stolen kisses from boys back in Missouri, but this was different. This was a man who saw her clearly, glasses and all, and chose to kiss her anyway. The kiss deepened, his hand coming up to cup her cheek with surprising tenderness. Rebecca's heart pounded so hard she was sure he must feel it. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted, "but I was not sure you felt the same way." "I do," Rebecca said, and the admission felt like stepping off a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating at once. "But Yates, I do not want to be another mistake, another wrong choice. You should be certain." He pulled back enough to look at her fully, his hands framing her face. "Rebecca Eleanor, I have never been more certain of anything in my life. You are brilliant and brave and beautiful, and I will spend however long it takes proving to you that you are not a mistake or a second choice. You are the right choice, the only choice I want." Tears pricked at Rebecca's eyes, but they were good tears, healing tears. I was so angry at Thomas for rejecting me, but now I think perhaps it was a blessing. If he had not, I never would have met you. Then I owe Thomas Callahan a debt of gratitude, Yates said with a smile that transformed his serious face, though I am still inclined to punch him in the face if I see him. Rebecca laughed, the sound surprised out of her. When was the last time she had laughed like that, free and genuine? She could not remember. They talked until the stars came out, making plans and sharing dreams. Yates wanted to expand his herd and eventually build a larger house. Rebecca wanted to save enough money to have security, never to be dependent or desperate again. They wanted different things, but they also wanted the same thing: a life built on solid ground with someone trustworthy at their side. As the weeks turned into months, their relationship deepened and solidified. Yates courted her properly, coming to town to take her to church socials and community gatherings, always respectful and attentive. Rebecca continued working at the Silver Star and spending her Sundays at the Broken Creek, but increasingly, those Sundays felt less like work and more like coming home. They faced obstacles, of course. Gossip followed Rebecca wherever she went, whispers about the mail-order bride who worked in a saloon. Some of the respectable women in town looked down their noses at her, and she was pointedly not invited to certain social functions. But Yates stood by her side through it all, making it clear that anyone who disrespected Rebecca was not welcome in his life. Thomas Callahan married Victoria Hartford in November, a lavish affair that the whole town talked about for weeks. Rebecca felt nothing but relief when she heard the news. She and Yates attended the Christmas dance together, and if people stared at the rancher who had chosen the bookkeeper with thick glasses over more conventional beauties, they stared appreciatively. Rebecca wore a new dress, dark green wool that Martha had helped her sew, and her glasses caught the lamplight as Yates whirled her around the dance floor. "You are the most beautiful woman here," he whispered in her ear during a waltz. "You are biased," she replied, but she smiled. "I am honest. I see you clearly, Rebecca, everything about you. And I see you," she said, reaching up to touch his face. "Clearly." It was on Christmas Eve that Yates asked her to marry him. They were at the ranch, sitting by the fire after finishing the year-end accounts, when he suddenly got down on one knee and pulled a simple gold band from his pocket. "I know this is not a fancy ring," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "And I know I am not offering you an easy life. The ranch is still struggling, and it will be years before we are truly comfortable. But I love you, Rebecca Eleanor, with everything I am. I love your sharp mind and your kind heart, and yes, I love your glasses and the way you look at the world through them. Will you marry me? Will you be my partner and my wife?" Rebecca's vision blurred, and for once, it had nothing to do with her eyesight. She took off her glasses to wipe her eyes, and Yates gently took them from her hand, cleaning them on his shirt before carefully placing them back on her nose. "I need you to see clearly when you answer," he said with a soft smile. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I will marry you, Yates Crawford." He slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her with a passion that took her breath away. When they finally broke apart, both flushed and breathing hard, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "I will spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice," he promised. "You already have," she whispered back. They were married in January of 1879, a simple ceremony at the little church in Nogales with Martha and Yates's ranch hands as witnesses. Rebecca wore a cream-colored dress that Martha had gifted her, and Yates wore his best suit, brushed clean of dust for the occasion. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Yates lifted her veil to kiss her, Rebecca felt a completeness she had never known before. The wedding reception was held at the Silver Star, Martha insisting on hosting despite Rebecca's protests. The saloon was decorated with paper chains and lanterns, and what seemed like half the town showed up to celebrate. Even some of the respectable women who had previously snubbed Rebecca attended, won over by the obvious devotion between the bride and groom. Thomas and Victoria Callahan did not attend, but Rebecca heard through the gossip chain that they were already having difficulties. Victoria had expected a life of leisure and luxury, not the hard work required of a rancher's wife. Thomas had expected a decorative companion, not a demanding woman with expensive tastes. Rebecca felt a moment of sympathy for both of them, trapped in a marriage based on surface attractions rather than deeper compatibility. The first year of marriage was not easy. The ranch required constant work, and money was tight. Rebecca continued doing bookkeeping for Martha and several other businesses in town, her income helping to keep them afloat during lean months. She learned to cook on a wood stove, to tend chickens and a vegetable garden, to help with ranch work when Yates was short-handed. Her hands grew rough and her skin weathered by the harsh sun, but she had never been happier. Yates was everything she had dreamed a husband could be. Devoted, supportive, endlessly patient with her when she struggled with new skills. He never once made her feel inferior or inadequate, even when she burned dinner or let the chickens escape, or made any of a dozen other mistakes as she learned to manage a household on the frontier. "We are partners," he would remind her when she apologized for her failures. "We learn together and we succeed together." They talked about children, both wanting a family, but Rebecca did not conceive immediately. She tried not to worry about it, knowing that stress would only make things harder, but as months passed, she could not help feeling a growing anxiety. What if she was barren? What if she could not give Yates the children he deserved? He seemed to sense her fears without her voicing them. One night as they lay in bed, his arms around her, he kissed her temple and said quietly, "If we never have children, I will still count myself the luckiest man alive. You are enough, Rebecca. You have always been enough." His words eased something tight in her chest, and she turned to kiss him properly. 2 weeks later, she realized her monthly courses were late. The baby came in the spring of 1880, a healthy boy with dark hair and his father's gray eyes. They named him Samuel, after Yates's father, and Rebecca fell completely in love the moment the midwife placed him in her arms. Yates was equally besotted, staring at his son with wonder and terror in equal measure. "I do not know how to be a father," he confessed that first night, as they watched Samuel sleep in the cradle Yates had built with his own hands. "And I do not know how to be a mother," Rebecca said, reaching for his hand. "But we will learn together, just like we learned everything else." Motherhood was harder than any work Rebecca had ever done, but also more rewarding. She learned to function on little sleep, to nurse and soothe, and somehow keep both a baby and a household running. Martha was a godsend, coming out to the ranch regularly to help in bringing supplies and advice. The other ranch wives in the area, who had been standoffish at first, warmed to Rebecca once she became a mother, seeing her as one of them now. The ranch prospered slowly but steadily. With Rebecca managing the finances and Yates's tireless work, they paid down the debts and began to expand the herd. They hired another ranch hand, then another, building the operation into something sustainable and profitable. 3 years after Samuel's birth, Rebecca gave birth to a daughter they named Caroline, a tiny thing with her mother's features and a lusty cry that announced her presence to the world. "2 perfect children," Yates said, holding Caroline while Samuel climbed over him like a young mountain goat. "We are blessed beyond measure." Rebecca agreed wholeheartedly. She had gone from rejected mail-order bride to successful rancher's wife, from lonely and desperate to surrounded by love and family. The journey had not been easy, but it had been worth every difficult step. By 1885, the Broken Creek was one of the most successful mid-sized ranches in the territory. They had paid off all the debts and were accumulating savings. Yates had built the larger house he had dreamed of, a solid two-story structure with glass windows and a wide porch that caught the evening breeze. Rebecca had a proper office for her bookkeeping business, which now included clients from as far away as Tucson. Samuel was 5 years old, already helping with small chores around the ranch and showing his father's quiet determination. Caroline was 2, a whirlwind of energy and curiosity who kept Rebecca constantly vigilant. And Rebecca was pregnant again, this time with twins if the midwife's assessment was correct. "Twins," Yates had said when they got the news, his eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and panic. "Are you certain as one can be?" Rebecca replied, laughing at his expression. "We will manage, Yates. We always do." The twins, another boy and girl, arrived in late autumn, both healthy and loud. They named the boy David and the girl Emma, and the house became a cheerful chaos of children and activity. Yates proved to be a devoted father, patient and playful with his children, despite the demanding work of the ranch. Rebecca juggled motherhood and business, grateful for the help of a young woman from town, whom they hired as a part-time nanny and housekeeper. Rebecca thought often of her journey west, of stepping off that stagecoach 7 years ago to face Thomas Callahan's rejection. It had felt like the end of the world at the time, the final confirmation that she was not good enough, not pretty enough, not desirable enough. But it had actually been the beginning of her real life, the opening of a door to something infinitely better than she had imagined. On their 7th wedding anniversary, Yates gave her a gift, a new pair of spectacles with thinner, lighter lenses that a traveling optometrist had specially ordered for her. "I know you say you love my glasses," Rebecca said, fitting them carefully onto her face and marveling at how much clearer everything looked. "But these are wonderful." "I do love your glasses," Yates said, pulling her into his arms, "because they let you see the world clearly. And I love that you see me clearly, all of me, and chose me anyway." "You make it sound like you are difficult to love," Rebecca teased, reaching up to kiss him. "You are the easiest person in the world to love, Yates Crawford. That is because you see the best in me. You always have, from the very beginning." They stood together on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over their land while their children played in the yard under the watchful eye of the nanny. It was an ordinary moment, one of thousands they would share over their life together, but it was also perfect. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if Thomas had married you?" Yates asked suddenly. Rebecca considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. I think I would have been comfortable enough, but never truly happy. Thomas wanted a wife who would look good on his arm and manage his household without challenging him. I would have been miserable trying to be that person. He married the wrong woman, and I am grateful every day for his stupidity." "As am I," Rebecca agreed. She adjusted her new glasses and smiled up at her husband. "You know what you said to me once about me seeing clearly? I remember. I think it works both ways. You see me clearly too, Yates. You always have. You saw past the thick glasses and plain face to the person underneath." "There was nothing to see past," Yates said seriously. "I saw a beautiful, brilliant woman from the very first moment. The glasses are just a part of you, like your kindness and your courage and your terrible singing voice." "I do not have a terrible singing voice," Rebecca protested, laughing. "My love, I adore everything about you, but you absolutely cannot carry a tune." She swatted his arm playfully, and he caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. The teasing faded into something more tender as he looked at her with the same intensity he had shown that first Sunday on the ranch, when she had been barely more than a stranger. "I meant what I said back then when I proposed," Yates said quietly. "I see you, Rebecca. Everything about you clearly and completely, and I love every single thing I see." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears, the kind she had grown used to in her years with Yates. "And I see you, my love. My wonderful, devoted, hard-working husband. The man who chose me when another man rejected me, who valued me when I could not value myself." "Then you will see my devotion clearly," Yates said, echoing words he had spoken years ago, "today and every day for the rest of our lives." He kissed her then, deep and sweet, and Rebecca kissed him back with all the love in her heart. Their children's laughter carried on the evening breeze, and somewhere in the barn, one of the horses whinnied. The desert air was cooling as night approached, bringing relief from the day's heat. This was home, Rebecca thought as she held her husband close. Not just the house or the land or even the beautiful family they had built together. Home was this: being known, being valued, being chosen by someone who saw her clearly and loved what he saw. The years continued to pass, bringing their share of joys and sorrows, triumphs and challenges. There were droughts that tested their resources and their resilience. There were illnesses that kept Rebecca up at night, praying over fevered children until the sickness passed. There were business setbacks and difficult decisions, times when the future looked uncertain and frightening. But through it all, Rebecca and Yates faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each passing year. They learned each other's rhythms and moods, developed a shorthand of glances and gestures that communicated volumes without words. They argued sometimes, both having strong opinions and stubborn streaks, but they always talked through their disagreements with respect and a genuine desire to understand each other's perspective. The children grew and thrived. Samuel developed his father's love of ranching and his mother's head for business, a combination that promised well for his future. Caroline was clever and spirited, learning to read by age 4 and constantly asking questions about everything. The twins, David and Emma, were inseparable, inventing elaborate games and getting into mischief together. Martha remained a close friend and frequent visitor, eventually selling the Silver Star and retiring to a small house near the Crawford Ranch. She became a beloved honorary grandmother to the children, spoiling them with sweets and stories of the wild early days of Nogales. In 1888, Rebecca had one more child, another boy they named Thomas. It was Yates who suggested the name, saying it was time to let go of old hurts and acknowledge that without Thomas Callahan's rejection, they never would have found each other. "Besides," he said with a grin, "our Thomas will grow up knowing he is loved and valued, unlike his unfortunate namesake." Rebecca agreed, though she could not resist pointing out that Thomas Callahan seemed to be doing well enough. He and Victoria had eventually divorced, a scandal that rocked Nogales society. Victoria had returned to San Francisco, while Thomas had remarried, this time to a practical widow who actually enjoyed ranch life. They seemed content enough, though Rebecca rarely interacted with them beyond polite greetings at community events. The new Thomas Crawford was a quiet, thoughtful child who loved books as much as his mother did. Rebecca would often find him curled up in the study, wearing a pair of reading glasses he needed from an early age, completely absorbed in whatever story had captured his imagination. "He takes after you," Yates would say fondly, watching his youngest son through the study window. "He has your eyes," Rebecca would reply, "and your good heart." By the early 1890s, the Broken Creek was recognized as one of the finest ranches in Arizona Territory. Samuel was old enough to take on significant responsibilities, working alongside his father and learning every aspect of ranch management. Caroline had become an accomplished horsewoman and was being courted by several young men from neighboring ranches, much to Yates's protective dismay. The twins were 11, still young but showing signs of the adults they would become. And young Thomas was 8, bookish and gentle, content in his own world of stories and imagination. Rebecca still did bookkeeping, though she had cut back on outside clients to focus on managing the ranch's increasingly complex finances. She wore new glasses now, updated every few years as her prescription changed, but they were always thick, always prominent on her face. She had long since stopped caring what anyone thought about them. They were part of her, tools that allowed her to see the world and the people she loved with perfect clarity. One evening in late spring of 1893, as Rebecca and Yates sat on their porch watching the sunset, a habit they had maintained throughout their marriage, Yates took her hand and squeezed it gently. "I have been thinking," he said quietly. "That sounds dangerous," Rebecca teased. "I am serious, love. I have been thinking about how far we have come from that first day when you showed up at the Silver Star, rejected and alone, to this." He gestured at the prosperous ranch, the comfortable house, the sounds of their children inside preparing for dinner. "We built something remarkable, you and I." "We did," Rebecca agreed, "though there were times I was not sure we would make it. But we did make it because we worked together, because we chose each other every single day." Yates turned to face her fully, his gray eyes serious in the fading light. "I want you to know that marrying you was the best decision I ever made. You saved me, Rebecca. I was drowning in debt and loneliness and grinding work, and you came along and gave me a reason to keep fighting, a partnership that made the burden bearable." "You saved me too," Rebecca said, her voice thick with emotion. "I was broken when I came here, convinced that I was unlovable because of how I looked, because I was not pretty enough or graceful enough or whatever enough. And you looked at me and saw value, saw beauty, saw everything I had to offer. Because it was there to see," Yates insisted. "I did not have to look hard, Rebecca. Your beauty and worth were obvious from the start." They kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. Inside, they heard Martha calling that dinner was ready, heard the stampede of children rushing to the table. Their life was not perfect, but it was theirs, built on a foundation of mutual respect, genuine love, and the determination to see each other clearly, exactly as they were. "Come," Yates said, standing and offering his hand. "Our family awaits." Rebecca took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. As they walked inside together, she caught her reflection in the window glass, saw her own face with its thick spectacles, and the lines that years of sun and laughter had etched around her eyes. She looked nothing like the beauty that Thomas Callahan had preferred, nothing like the ideal that society said women should aspire to, but she looked like herself, and that was enough. More than enough, because Yates Crawford loved her exactly as she was. Inside, the house was warm and bright, filled with the voices of their children and the clatter of dishes and the thousand small sounds of family life. Martha was helping young Thomas set the table, while Samuel and Caroline argued good-naturedly about something trivial. The twins were already seated, waiting impatiently for the meal to begin. "There you are," Martha said with a knowing smile. "I was about to send a search party." "We were just talking," Yates said, but he kept hold of Rebecca's hand as they moved to the table. Dinner was a lively affair, as it always was with 5 children and Martha's witty commentary. They talked about the day's events, made plans for the week ahead, laughed at Samuel's story about a particularly stubborn calf and Caroline's imitation of one of the ranch hands. It was ordinary and chaotic and absolutely perfect. After the children were in bed and Martha had retired to her cottage, Rebecca and Yates sat together in the study, her going over some accounts while he read a newspaper that was only 2 weeks old, practically fresh news by frontier standards. "There is talk that Arizona will become a state soon," Yates commented, looking up from his paper. "Could be in the next decade or so." "That will be something," Rebecca said absently, focused on a column of figures that was not balancing correctly. "We will have been here almost 15 years by then. Imagine that, being part of a state's formation." Rebecca set down her pen and removed her glasses to rub her tired eyes. "It is strange to think how much has changed. When I arrived, Nogales was barely more than a dusty outpost. Now we have proper streets and a school and enough people that everyone does not know everyone else's business." "You miss Missouri?" She considered the question honestly. "Not really. Sometimes I miss my parents, wish they could have met you and known their grandchildren, but the place itself. No, this is home now. It has been for a long time." Yates set aside his newspaper and came to kneel beside her chair, a gesture that reminded her of his proposal all those years ago. He took her hands in his, looking up at her with an expression of such love that it took her breath away even after all this time. "Rebecca Crawford, you are the most remarkable woman I have ever known. You took a rejection and turned it into an opportunity. You took a struggling ranch and helped build it into something prosperous. You took my battered heart and made it whole again. I am grateful every single day that Thomas Callahan was a fool." Rebecca laughed through sudden tears. "I am grateful too. Though I should probably write him a thank you note at this point." "Do not you dare," Yates said with mock severity. "The man does not deserve your thanks. He deserves nothing but to live with the knowledge that he let you slip through his fingers. He has moved on, just as I have." "Yes, but he moved on to consolation prizes while I got the grand prize." Rebecca pulled her husband up into her lap, an awkward maneuver that made them both laugh. She kissed him thoroughly, pouring years of love and gratitude into the gesture. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Yates rested his forehead against hers in their familiar gesture of intimacy. "I love you," Rebecca whispered, "more than I have words to express." "Then you will see my devotion clearly," Yates whispered back, completing the ritual exchange that had become their private promise to each other, today and always. They stayed like that for a long moment, holding each other in the lamplight, surrounded by the life they had built together. Outside, the desert night was cool and still, stars blazing in the vast darkness above the ranch. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, and from the barn came the soft sound of horses settling for the night. This was happiness, Rebecca thought. Not the fairy tale kind with perfect beauty and effortless love, but the real kind, earned through hard work and sustained through choice and commitment. The kind that lasted because it was built on seeing each other clearly, thick glasses and all, and choosing to love what you saw. The years continued their steady march forward. The children grew into teenagers and then adults, each finding their own path in life. Samuel took over most of the day-to-day ranch operations, allowing Yates to step back slightly, though he never fully retired from the work he loved. Caroline married a neighboring rancher's son, a good man who treated her with the respect and devotion she deserved. The twins eventually went their separate ways, David to study engineering in California and Emma to become a teacher in Tucson. Young Thomas went east to college, the first Crawford to do so, and returned with a law degree and a fierce determination to fight for fair treatment of small ranchers against the big cattle corporations. Rebecca and Yates grew older together, their hair graying, their steps slowing, but their love constant. They became grandparents, delighting in Caroline's children, 3 boys who loved spending summers at the Broken Creek learning to ride and rope and work cattle. Martha lived to see her 91st birthday, before passing peacefully in her sleep, and Rebecca mourned the loss of her dear friend even as she celebrated the long life Martha had lived. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1904, their children threw them a surprise party, gathering family and friends from all over the territory to celebrate. The house was full of laughter and music and love, 3 generations of Crawfords and honorary Crawfords filling every room. Late in the evening, when the younger children were asleep and the adults were still talking and laughing, Rebecca slipped out to the porch for a moment of quiet. She stood at the railing, looking out over the land that had become so familiar, so beloved. The moon was full, casting silver light over everything, and she could see the dark shapes of cattle grazing in the near pasture, the solid outline of the barn, the fence lines stretching into the darkness. "Found you," Yates said softly, coming to stand beside her and wrapping an arm around her waist. "Just needed a moment to breathe," Rebecca said, leaning into his warmth. "It has been a wonderful day. It has, though I still say we did not need such a fuss. Our children love us and wanted to celebrate. Let them fuss." They stood in comfortable silence, the sounds of the party drifting out through the open windows behind them. Rebecca adjusted her glasses, the newest pair, and marveled at how clearly she could still see despite her advancing years. The optometrist in Tucson had told her that her prescription had barely changed in the last 5 years, that she was lucky to have such stable vision. "You remember the first time you kissed me?" Rebecca asked suddenly. "Of course. Right here on this porch, well, the old porch anyway. You were afraid you were a mistake, and I told you that you were the only choice I wanted. You kept your promise, you know. You have spent every day since then proving your devotion." "It has not been hard," Yates said simply. "Loving you has been the easiest thing I have ever done." Inside, someone started playing the piano, and Caroline's voice rose in song, clear and sweet. Other voices joined in, creating a harmonious blend that filled the night air. Rebecca recognized the melody, an old hymn that they sang in church, about love and faithfulness and God's enduring grace. "Dance with me," Yates said, turning Rebecca to face him and pulling her into his arms. They swayed together on the porch, dancing to the music drifting from inside, moving with the ease of long practice and deep familiarity. Rebecca's head rested against Yates's shoulder, and she closed her eyes, letting herself simply feel the moment. The strength of his arms around her, the steady beat of his heart against her cheek, the cool night air on her face, the music wrapping around them like a blessing. 25 years, she murmured. "Where did the time go? Into building this," Yates said, gesturing with his chin toward the house full of their family. "Into creating something that will last long after we are gone. No regrets, not a single one. You." Rebecca thought about the scared, rejected woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in 1878, the one who had been sure her life was over before it really began. She thought about all the challenges they had faced, the struggles and sorrows mixed in with the joys and triumphs. She thought about the family they had created, the legacy they were leaving. "No regrets," she said firmly. "Not one." They danced until the music ended, and then they danced a little longer in the silence, moving to a rhythm only they could hear. Inside, the party continued without them, their family carrying on the celebration, but out here on the porch, Rebecca and Yates existed in their own perfect moment. "I will always see you clearly," Yates whispered into her hair. "My beautiful, brilliant wife." "And I will always see you," Rebecca whispered back. "My devoted, wonderful husband." It was the promise they had made to each other 25 years ago, and it was the promise they renewed with every passing day. To see each other truly and completely, to love what they saw, and to choose each other again and again, no matter what life brought their way. As they finally went back inside to rejoin their family, Rebecca paused to look back at the moonlit land one more time. This was the life she had built from the ashes of rejection and disappointment. This was the happiness she had earned through courage and hard work, and the willingness to take a chance on love when it appeared in an unexpected form. The rejected bride had found her home, and it was more wonderful than anything she could have imagined standing in front of that church in Nogales all those years ago. The rancher had kept his promise, showing his devotion clearly every single day, and together they had created something beautiful and lasting. Inside, young Thomas came to find her, taking her hand and pulling her toward where the family was gathering for a photograph. The photographer from town had set up his camera and was arranging everyone. Yates stood at the center, tall and proud despite his 60 years, and Rebecca moved to stand beside him where she belonged. "Everyone ready," the photographer called. "Hold very still now." Yates took Rebecca's hand, threading their fingers together, and she squeezed back. Their children arranged themselves around them, Caroline holding her youngest son, Samuel standing with his arm around his father's shoulders, the twins flanking the group, young Thomas kneeling in front. The photographer's flash powder exploded with a bright flare, capturing the moment forever. When they saw the finished photograph weeks later, Rebecca studied it carefully through her thick spectacles, taking in every detail. There they were, the whole family, frozen in time. And at the center of it all, she and Yates stood hand in hand, their love visible in the way they leaned toward each other, in the soft smiles on their faces, in the complete comfort and trust that years of partnership had built. She had the photograph framed and hung it in the study, where she could see it every day. It became one of her most treasured possessions, tangible proof of the life she had built and the love she had found. The years after the party passed more quickly than Rebecca would have liked. Her health remained good, though she moved more slowly and tired more easily. Yates developed a touch of arthritis that made cold mornings difficult, but he refused to stop working entirely, still riding out to check on the cattle and supervise the ranch operations. They took more time for each other, long afternoons spent reading together in the study or sitting on the porch watching the sunset. They talked about everything and nothing, comfortable in the silences, delighted by each other's company even after decades of marriage. More grandchildren arrived, and then great-grandchildren, each new generation a source of wonder and joy. The broken creek remained in the family, Samuel and his son working it together, maintaining the legacy that Yates and Rebecca had built. On a warm evening in the spring of 1912, 33 years after their wedding, Rebecca and Yates sat on their porch as the sun went down, painting the sky in the brilliant colors they had watched together thousands of times before. Rebecca's newest glasses, needed because her prescription had finally changed, sat firmly on her nose, letting her see every detail of the landscape and the man beside her. "Arizona will be a state this year," Yates commented, his voice a bit rough with age but still strong. "February 14th, they are saying. Valentine's Day. Fitting, do not you think? Very fitting. We will have been here for the entire journey from territory to statehood. We built something good here, Rebecca. Not just the ranch, but a family, a legacy. Our grandchildren and great-grandchildren will know this land, work this land, love this land." "We did build something good," Rebecca agreed. "Together." Yates turned to look at her, and in his gray eyes she saw the same love and devotion that had been there from the beginning, undimmed by time or age or the countless challenges they had faced. He reached over and took her hand, his grip still firm despite the arthritis. "Rebecca Crawford, you have made my life extraordinary. I love you more today than I did 33 years ago, and that is saying something, because I loved you quite desperately even then. And I love you, Yates Crawford, with all my heart and soul. You took a rejected woman and made her feel chosen, valued, cherished. You gave me everything I ever dreamed of and so much more." They sat together as the stars began to appear, holding hands and watching the night claim the day. Inside, they could hear their family, multiple generations under one roof for a visit, the sound of children laughing and adults talking, the clatter of dishes and the warmth of shared love. "Then you will see my devotion clearly," Yates said softly, "today and always." "And you will see mine," Rebecca replied, completing their ritual exchange. They remained on the porch until the last light faded from the sky, two old people who had loved each other well and built a life worth living. The rejected bride and the devoted rancher, seeing each other clearly through thick glasses, and the wisdom of years, still choosing each other, still grateful for the chance meeting that had changed everything. When they finally went inside, Yates helped Rebecca to her feet with practiced care, and they walked together into the warmth and light of their home, surrounded by the family they had created and the love they had nurtured for over 3 decades. Behind them, the desert night settled over the Broken Creek Ranch, peaceful and eternal, the land they had worked and loved bearing silent witness to a love story that had begun with rejection and bloomed into something beautiful and lasting. And in the years that followed, their story became part of the family legend, told and retold to new generations. The tale of the rejected bride who wore thick glasses and the rancher who said, "Then you will see my devotion clearly," and proved it every single day of their long and happy life together.